Good everybody, and welcome to episode 107 of the Teacher Emilio podcast. Today I've got, let's say, also a special guest, someone that I've just met recently, and I'm really happy that, we get to record this episode. And I purposely told you, wait, don't tell me too much about you. I want to record an episode with you on the podcast, so it's a pleasure to have here Will with us. Will, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be awesome.
Now, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I'm from Hong Kong originally, born there and lived there for 12 years when we moved back here around 2015. And since then, been educated the latter part of my high school here and university. And since then, I've grown almost grown in two different countries and two different systems completely, which is pretty cool.
I still remember when we first met. To give context to everyone, do you remember how we met?
I think was it a gym exercise that we were confused about, or?
Yes, basically, and this is, I think, a good example. We'll touch on this a bit later on, but basically, I saw Will doing an exercise at the gym, and I just woke up to him like, hey man, what are you doing? But then, we had a bit of a chat, and when you told me I'm from Hong Kong, I was like, wait, stop. What do you mean? Tell me more. So how was it, for those listening, how was it growing up in Hong Kong and basically, growing in two different countries, two different cultures?
It was, from my experience anyway, from being born till 12, that's all I was really used to. We used to come back every so often to Melbourne as we had family here. We'd come back for 2 months at a time, as that was what the school curriculum would allow during the summer holidays. But growing up over there was awesome. Like, you're at school at 7:30 at your desks in the morning. You leave the school at 2:30, and then you have tutoring from 3:30, 4:30 till 6:30 in the afternoon. And then you just rinse, repeat, play sport, whether that be rugby, soccer, badminton, swimming, or basketball. Those were your kind of only options. And socialising was done on an AstroTurf pitch, the size of maybe smaller than a soccer pitch, and you were constantly living in 15, 16-storey minimum buildings.
Wow.
So compared to Australia, at least, where the school I went to here, we had 4 or 5 ovals.
Open spaces.
Completely, versus the school I went to in Hong Kong, which was 16 stories high, and you had to run all up and down to figure out where to actually, what class you want to go to.
Talking about high school, I had people in the podcast before coming and saying that when they did high school in Australia, or a few years or sometime in high school, that it was compared to their home country. This was someone from Japan saying that Australia is a bit more on the relaxing side. How was it for you? Because it's like, again, you're Aussie, right?
Yeah.
Growing up over there, but then you come to Australia. How was it? Did you have any reverse shock or did you have any culture shocks coming back to Australia?
Yeah, definitely. The key thing here is, in Hong Kong, if you did anything half decent, whether it be if you're good at sport, good at music, you were celebrated in that regard. Versus here, you have to kind of get under the radar a little bit, kind of subtly play it down to a degree. But in regards to the education aspect, it's a lot easier. I mean, it didn't reflect into my ATAR in the end, but it was a lot easier to what I was compared. For example, when I moved back here in year 6 here, grade 6 in Hong Kong, I was doing IB, which is different to VCE here, but it was a lot easier here versus IB in Hong Kong, which I think is the typical case, as I'm probably sure from the Japanese person you interviewed.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing that this person mentioned was that sometimes it was like expected to have lots of homework on holidays, or like summer holiday, and it's like, here you go, boom, batch of homework. Whereas in Australia, I think there is little to no homework, right?
That's pretty,
okay. So it's
pretty
at least
accurate,
from your experience. Okay.
Completely, yeah.
Now,
nice.
Do you have any, thinking about culture shock or like coming back to Australia, because it's not like this was a new country for you, right?
No.
Just wondering, growing up, so a part of you is like, I'm Aussie, but I'm from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Do you have that, what is it called? Let's say that clash of, or like that mini I've completely blanked out the.
No, I know what you mean, but yeah, completely.
Thank you.
Up until a couple of years ago, or even now, I don't think Australia's home. And going back to Hong Kong to try out for the national rugby team, when we went over there, me and my brother, we went there, but it didn't feel like home. We went to the same places, we went to the same apartment we lived in for 10 years of our lives, and it didn't feel like home. Whether that be because of, I've grown 9 years since then, or it's been just a completely different culture, like living here, and it's changed in its own right, definitely, but it just doesn't feel like home either way. So I don't know where home is.
Yeah, I think what I was looking for is like midlife crisis or like a cultural crisis, because I'm having the reverse where when I came to Australia, it's like I'm clearly not Aussie. I still don't feel like I'm Aussie now, but I feel maybe I'm somewhat a hybrid.
Yeah.
As in, maybe dealing with lots of international students, so I feel very close to where I came from. But on the flip side, sometimes when I listen to you guys, it's like, okay, I know what he or she said, so it's like I'm improving, type of, or like especially with like cultural differences and things.
So do you think, for you personally, do you think Venezuela's home, or do you think here's home?
That's a really tricky question, because as I listened to you, I really identified with what you said, because I went home last year. It was amazing, but at the same time, it's like it is home, but it is also not home, because it's not the home, let's say, I grew up in and that I remember.
Good point.
But, I guess maybe that may happen to lots of us, right? Like our, let's say, cities, towns, countries, maybe they change, and then, maybe home doesn't feel too much like home. The thing is also for me, when I left Venezuela, it was like I've got no plan to come back. And it's almost like I'm going to Australia and things have to work out. And then, life happened, eventually getting married, a job, etc. And then it's like having friends, having my students, and then I don't know. A part of me feels that Australia is home, but it's a different type of home, I suppose, because maybe it's like my home right now, right?
Yeah.
But then I've got like the home I grew up in. Maybe have you got that as well?
Yeah. Yes and no. I feel like, well, mum and dad really assisted in the actual moving to Melbourne from Hong Kong, and they were the rock. So they used to, when we used to discuss like, Hong Kong is home versus Melbourne is home, they'd always say just wherever your family is home, which is something I've kind of become accustomed to. And as an Aussie, when you fly Qantas, there's a song called It Feels Like Home, or Feels Like Home to Me. It's the Qantas, well, it might not be the case anymore, but it was a theme song that Qantas used consistently for when I was growing up on the planes. And it made my mum, myself, and my brothers always just bawl our eyes out when we were leaving Melbourne, because that's where our family was, to go back to Hong Kong. And then when we hear the same thing going elsewhere, it kind of feels like Melbourne is our emotional home.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I'm just excited to see. I'm only 21. I'm keen to see what the world holds in terms of another home. But I think that's kind of what you had moving to Australia.
Look, and eventually maybe you might find another place. You stay there for some time, and then life happens, and then I think eventually you start having like, I don't know. At least for me, maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. Let us know in the comments if this happens to any of you. But for me, at least, it's like you start having like your hometown or like your home where you grew up, and then other homes. Maybe you slowly expand.
Completely.
Hey, and you mentioned, you mentioned the academic side of it.
Yeah, definitely.
But what about like that going under the radar? Can you touch up on that a little bit? Because I think that's another difference between Hong Kong and Australia, right?
Yeah, tall poppy syndrome, I think, is what would kind of happened here. We kind of expected it when we moved back here, that there was going to be some elements of it, and there are definitely elements in other countries, but nowhere near as much. And I feel like in Melbourne especially, you kind of, well, depending on, like I play rugby, it's not really a played sport. You kind of have to know the people in your area to play the sport. So that's kind of a bit of a niche sort of area. But other sports or other things, if you yourself vocalize saying, "Oh, I'm really, really good at this. I'm confident in it," unless you can consistently show up and constantly, well, excuse the pun, show up to the haters, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
or people who would disagree with you or try and put you back in your place, in quotations, you kind of are like, oh, he's so up himself, oh, he's so egotistical, versus you might just be, you know, versus in other countries, if, you know, you're really good at football or you're really good at weightlifting, you'd be like, okay, cool, I'm really good at this. Like, oh, cool, congratulations, and go on with your day. Maybe there might be a snide comment every so often, like, oh, yeah, whatever, good for you, da-da-da, but there's no real negative connotation that comes along with it.
And when it comes to, let's say, being in Hong Kong, how would it be different from how it is in Australia? It's like you're good at a sport, and then, I mean, I'm not saying that everyone is going to be praising you, but it would. How would it change? Because maybe there is like a bit of a line between tall poppy syndrome, where, you know, maybe actually. For those that may not be, you know, too familiar with the concept, can you tell us in a few words what's tall poppy syndrome?
That's going to stretch my memory. I'm in holiday mode. But how I view tall poppy syndrome is everyone, no matter how good you are, how great you have become, whether it be, you know, you're up here or up here, the gross majority want to cut you down to a level where everyone is on the same level. And if you are of any great, for example, if you're an AFL player, those amazing, not necessarily it's going to be the case in AFL because everyone loves AFL, specifically in Melbourne.
Yeah.
But they'd bring you down a peg saying, hey, look, we don't want to hear about it. We don't really want to, like, sure, you're great at your sport, you're great at what you do, but we don't want to hear about it. We don't want to, it's not your personality. If you can, we don't want to hear about it 24/7. That's kind of what we want to hear. And you can voice it, yeah, great, but we don't want to hear about it. We don't care. That's pretty much ultimately how I've interpreted it in my life, and versus like in Hong Kong specifically.
And I guess the difference is that maybe, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm guessing that maybe Will that grew up in Hong Kong, you would be a bit more open as to, like you right now in Melbourne, where you gotta at least like have that filter of, okay, maybe should I say this? Should I not say this? Will this person think I'm showing off? Or?
Not completely. Yeah. I mean, in Hong Kong, I was at 12. I was the national under 12 captains for Hong Kong for rugby in Hong Kong.
Wow.
And no, but we played a New Year's Day match. That was what they did. They had the team from Kowloon and they had the team from Hong Kong Island. I was the Hong Kong Island team. And you know, you tell your classmates, oh, I'm playing this, they'd be rapt, they'd be so happy for you. Versus, you know, I came here and I made the state team the same year for the Victorian state team for rugby. And, you know, I told my classmates and they just said, okay, cool, who cares?
No way.
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, you know, you get a bit of praise like for that one, maybe 20% of the time, but if you like, you know, if you praise it more than once, it's just like, shut up. No one cares.
You know, it's crazy because it is like a state level, you know, and you seem in a bit of a shock because after watching lots of, you know, Japanese anime, like for example, there is one called Slam Dunk that is about basketball, and it's crazy when you see like other team members, or sorry, like let's say other students supporting their high school team or like their high school team. And I guess this could this could apply with different sports. So it's so interesting that that's one of those differences that you see it in, like, let's say TV movies, but maybe it's a thing, you know, it happens. That's not to say that, you know, every school in Australia is going to be like that, but I mean,
it's not the school, it was just the individuals I kind of hung out with at the time. But if you played footy, different story altogether. You'd have
you're famous, everyone loves you.
Everyone loves you, teachers love you, and then as soon as you get even sniffed at to get drafted, all of a sudden you are like the person everyone wants to be friends with, which makes sense. If like in the States, you are going to the NFL draft, so combine all the, you know, everyone wants to be friends with someone famous. But, you know, if you play a different sport where you may not, at a high level, where you might not be as, you know, relevant to the you know, the minds of year sixes and all that jazz, it kind of just like put you back in your place a little bit, like no one really cares, which is fine in hindsight. But
exactly. But maybe it's not, I mean, even if no one cares, it's just really tough or like it's really like cutting you if they go like, who cares type of. But you're like, mate, state level. I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, but hey, it's an accomplishment, right?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yeah, I've had good fortunes in rugby in Victoria, so I'm lucky with that, and you know that's kind of helped me grow as a person. But as the only kid brand new to the school in that year level, and then you try to make friends, and then all of a sudden you just get, you know, null voided because your voice, and you try to be relevant, like, oh, I play rugby, I play this, and just no one cares, which is like, you know, it's a hard reality to face, and that's just real life.
I mean, it's not like, oh yeah, let's wood the red carpet. But,
Yeah,
but it's also weird that, I mean, it's not like, oh, cool, blah, 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 or I don't know.
No, it's just, if you're not relevant, then don't worry about it, which sucks. But, you know, that's life.
Well, look, maybe it could be a different story if you had moved to anywhere New South Wales, who knows? Or Queensland, who knows?
Maybe. I'm not sure if I would have made the team, but who knows?
Maybe more competition there. I don't know, but
be more fun.
You know, just wondering. Another thing that comes to mind is since Australia is known for being super multicultural.
Yeah.
For those of us who have never been to Hong Kong and we don't know about it, how was it growing up there? Because a part of me imagines that like the majority of people might be predominantly from Asia.
Almost, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. How was it growing up there? Like, was it challenging in a sense? Because, you mentioned like the early years of your life, you were growing up there. So I don't know. Did you get any backlash in that sense, or?
Yes and no. I was fortunate enough to grow up and quite privileged in the schools I went to in Hong Kong. I went to a private school over there, and we were exposed to primarily Western news at the school. It was a Canadian international school. So that's what I had a Canadian accent for 10 years of my life, and I was exposed to Westerners. But local day-to-day, whatever, it'd probably be maybe 40-50, it'd be 50-50 most of the time for locals to Westerners, depending on where you went. But I was very much in my Western bubble of you're around Brits all the time, you're around Canadians, Aussies. So I was kind of in that little bubble. But when we went back more recently, it's definitely become a lot more mainland and a lot more local, which is great for the country, I guess, when it goes back to the Passover, which makes sense. But it doesn't feel, it's nowhere near the same, which...
You mentioned that you were in your British bubble, let's say, English-speaking bubble.
Yeah, definitely.
This is something that happens to lots of people here in Australia, like regardless of where we're from. You've got like the Latino bubble, Chinese bubble, I don't know, Indian bubble, etc., etc. And sometimes people are like stuck there, let's say.
Oh, completely.
And it's not necessarily bad, because it's like your network support group. But sometimes students come to me saying, hey, Emilio, I want to practice more, or, I want to talk more to Aussies. But I'm just wondering, you mentioned to me that you learned Mandarin. So how was it? Did you like have Chinese classes at school, or?
Yeah, every day we'd have 2 hours of Mandarin. We would have that at either the start of the day or middle of the day, and 2 hours of Mandarin from the age of 3.
Wow. And when it comes to learning Mandarin, right, and having like English, I guess you spoke English at home, right?
Yeah.
With mom and dad and everything. Yeah. How was it being in the, let's say, English-speaking bubble while you were in Hong Kong and you were learning Mandarin as well? Or like you were having Mandarin classes? Yeah,
I mean, it was tough in regards to you don't really speak it at home, so you can't really practice at home, which is why in the end, the last 4 or 5 years we were in Hong Kong, we had a Chinese tutor come over every other day to, make sure that we were above we were in the top maybe 30%, to make sure we were in that little bracket of speaking Mandarin, speaking English, doing whatever course. We just wanted to be the bridge above higher, ideally. And, I loved the language. I loved speaking it. I've dropped off a bit now, but it was hard. It's not an easy, English is nowhere near as easy as Mandarin. I think English is probably one of the hardest languages to learn, I think, in my opinion, versus Mandarin, which is a close second. But it's hard to learn. It's hard to pick up on, characters versus letters.
And of course, all the tones and that. But look, we're not gonna get started with the tones.
yeah.
But I'm just wondering. You mentioned a key thing. Like at home, you spoke English.
Yeah.
You had, let's say that network. You had those teachers like 2 hours a day. But I'm just wondering so what did you do to learn Mandarin? Because this is something that could be happening to people in Australia where they have friends, let's say, with Spanish, who partner speaks Spanish or friends speak Spanish in a homestay or whatever. At work, everyone speaks Spanish. And then maybe the chances to practice their English are limited. So I'm just wondering, how was it in your case?
Yeah. I was quite fortunate to have parents who supported me learning the language and providing tutors on a regular basis. So I was quite fortunate in that regard. But if you're almost traveling to Melbourne or traveling and you're trying to pick up a language, either if you're uni age or if you can attend a university class to learn the language or just surround yourself in that language, that'd be awesome. For me, when I was working in the city, I would often just go down to Little Burke Street and just, give it a red hot crack. And if not, you just revert to pointing at the photos of what you want to have lunch. But you just try and surround yourself in it. You try and pick up a few phrases, and if you can, which is what we did for a while, we had a Chinese news network in the background, and you try and pick up a couple phrases here and there. But if that's if you're dedicated and you can be bothered listening to a radio station or TV show for half an hour. But Duolingo is always good. That's not a plug, but
it's like an extra resource,
completely.
right?
I just meet people who speak the language, expose yourself to it. That's what the best thing is, in my opinion.
Oh, good. Well, look, it's been an amazing interview. Just before we wrap up, I want to ask you, because you touch up on so many different things, like learning the language, going from one country to another. So I'm just wondering, what would you say to those people who are thinking of making Australia home, or maybe they want to improve their English skills? I know you mentioned now surrounding yourself with the language. And with all the things we talk about, what would be your closing message? The spotlight is on you.
Australia is awesome. If you can make your way down here even for a holiday, definitely come down. It's if you go to Melbourne, bring a change of clothes for the summer and winter, no matter what part of the year. It's confusing, but come down. It's awesome, lovely people majority of the time. We love alcohol, so I'm sure you guys we can all party every once in a while, and it's an amazing place. And in regards to English, just throw yourself in it fully. There's no point really trying to learn language half strength. Just go all in.
Boom, there we go.
But yeah.
Nice. Look, I think that it's a good way to finish up. Go all in. I normally tell students go laser focus, but I like that. Going all in. Well, look, it's been a pleasure having you. Thank you for sharing a bit about you growing up both in Hong Kong and Australia. And look, it's been an amazing episode. I really had a good time. I hope you had a good time. And of course, those of you who joined us here on YouTube and on Spotify, I hope you guys liked the episode. Remember that the best way to support the show is just sharing this with someone that you think will enjoy it. And hopefully we can have a part 2 in the future.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
Actually, I don't have an episode about rugby, so there we go.
Okay, well, that might be a 2-hour episode, but...
Okay, there we go. Get ready, guys. And well, this was episode 107. Don't miss me too much. I'll see you in the next one, and then I'll see you also, when we record again.
Awesome. Thank you.
Boom. See you in the next episode, guys. Take care.
See ya.